The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Their advanced civilizations built on logic, diplomacy, and technological superiority. War was a concept they had evolved beyond, until the day the Void Hunters emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies, creatures of pure malevolence that consumed entire worlds without mercy or reason. In their desperate hour, when their sophisticated weapons failed and their peaceful philosophies crumbled before an enemy that knew only destruction, the Council did something unprecedented. They reached out to a species they had long ignored, a young, primitive race from a backwater planet called Earth. A species that still knew the ancient art of war. The humans called them Marines. What the galaxy didn't understand was that they hadn't just called for help. They had awakened something far more dangerous than the Void Hunters themselves. They had awakened humanity's greatest strength, the willingness to stand between the innocent and annihilation, no matter the cost. This is the story of how Earth's finest answered that call, and how the galaxy learned that sometimes salvation comes not from the stars above, but from the warriors forged in the crucible of a world that never forgot how to fight. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in 3 centuries. Ambassador Zephyra of the Celestial Dominion stood before the massive holographic display showing the latest casualty reports, her normally serene features twisted with unprecedented fear. The numbers were staggering. 12-star systems completely devoured, their planets stripped bare of all organic matter, leaving behind nothing but lifeless rocks floating in the void. The Void Hunters have consumed the agricultural worlds of Kepler 442, she announced to the assembled delegates, each representing one of the 47 advanced civilizations that comprise the Council. 2 billion Nexari died in the space of 6 hours. Their distress signals simply stopped. Counselor Thex, 9, a synthetic being whose crystalline body pulsed with nervous energy, leaned forward in his hover seat. Our defensive fleets are being systematically destroyed. The entities adapt to our energy weapons within minutes of first contact. Plasma cannons, particle beams, even quantum disruptors. Nothing seems to cause lasting damage. The holographic display shifted to show grainy footage from a surviving scout ship. Massive creatures, each the size of a battlecruiser, moved through space without any visible means of propulsion. Their bodies were an unsettling mixture of organic tissue and what appeared to be living metal, constantly shifting and writhing as they consumed everything in their path. Smaller hunter-killers, no larger than fighters, but impossibly fast, swarmed around the larger entities like antibodies protecting a diseased organism. They're not just destroying our worlds, Admiral Kithera of the Void Navy reported, her tentacles coiling and uncoiling with distress. They're learning from each engagement. Our tactical computers estimate they'll reach the core worlds within 8 rotations if their current rate of expansion continues. The chamber fell silent. The core worlds housed over 1 trillion beings, the cultural and technological heart of galactic civilization. Their loss would mean the end of everything the Council had built over millennia. Chancellor Vex High, the ancient leader of the Council, raised one of his 4 arms for attention. His species had lived for over 2,000 years, and in all that time, he had never seen such devastation. We have exhausted our conventional options. Our most advanced weapons are useless. Our shields provide no protection, and our fastest ships cannot outrun them. We must consider alternative solutions. What alternatives? Demanded Counselor Jura, her scaled hide flushed with the colors of desperation. We've contacted every member species, requested aid from every available source. There are no military forces capable of... There is one. Vex High interrupted quietly. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Every major military power in the galaxy was already committed to the defense. The Dominion fleet, the synthetic armada, the bio-collective's living ships, all had been deployed, and all had failed spectacularly. The database archives contain records of a species that has never joined the Council. Vex High continued. A young civilization from the Outer Rim, designation. Sol 3, local name, Earth. Our xenobiological surveys classified them as primitive, still engaged in frequent warfare among their own kind. Counselor Thex-9's optical sensors flickered with confusion. You suggest we request aid from primitives who cannot even achieve planetary unity? What could such beings possibly offer? Vex-High activated a new section of the holographic display. Images of human military forces appeared, soldiers in camouflage uniforms, massive metal vehicles bristling with projectile weapons, aircraft raining explosive ordnance on enemy positions. To the advanced civilizations of the galaxy, it looked almost barbarically crude. They're the only sapient species in the known galaxy that has never stopped fighting wars, Vex-High explained. While we have evolved beyond the need for conflict, they have refined it into an art form. Their military doctrine speaks of concepts we abandoned millennia ago: tactics, strategy, sacrifice for the greater good. Ambassador Zephyra studied the images with growing interest. Humans appear to be a bipedal species, relatively small and physically unremarkable. But there was something in their recorded behavior patterns that caught her attention, a fierce determination that seemed almost alien to the civilized galaxy. Their technology is primitive by our standards, she observed. Chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, atomic fission weapons. But look at this tactical analysis. They've been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history. Not just skirmishes, but total wars involving their entire species. Fighting themselves, Counselor Jira pointed out with disgust. What kind of civilization wars against its own kind? One that understands warfare at a fundamental level, Vex-High replied. One that might succeed, where we have failed precisely because they think differently than we do. The debate that followed was heated. Many counselors argued that contacting such a primitive species would be futile at best and dangerous at worst. Others worried about the ethical implications of exposing humans to advanced galactic technology. But as reports continued to arrive of more worlds falling to the Void Hunters, practical concerns began to outweigh philosophical objections. Finally, Counselor Thex-9 raised the crucial question: even assuming these humans possess some form of military capability we lack, how would we communicate with them? Our standard diplomatic protocols require at least a Class 3 civilization with faster-than-light communication. We sent a ship, Vex-High decided. A small diplomatic vessel with quantum translators and cultural analysis protocols. We make contact directly and hope they are capable of understanding the magnitude of the threat. The vote was closer than anyone expected, 24 in favor, 23 opposed. It was the slimmest margin in Council history, reflecting how desperate their situation had become. 3 days later, the diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice departed for the Sol system. Its captain, Ambassador Veltar of the Unified Worlds, had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. Not because of the Void Hunters. The small, fast ship would avoid the combat zones entirely, but because first contact with a primitive species was notoriously unpredictable. The journey took 2 weeks at maximum hyperspace velocity. As the ship dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system, Veltar was struck by how ordinary it looked. A single yellow star with several planets. Nothing to distinguish it from thousands of other unremarkable systems throughout the galaxy. Yet somewhere in this backwater system lived the only species that might be able to save galactic civilization. Earth was the 3rd planet from the Sun, a blue-green world wrapped in white clouds. Veltar's instruments immediately detected the electromagnetic signatures of an active technological civilization, radio transmissions, satellite networks, and, surprisingly, several primitive space stations in orbit around the planet. They've achieved orbital construction, reported his science officer, a young Nexari named Killandra. Crude, but functional. And I'm detecting multiple launch sites on the surface. They're actively exploring their own system. Veltar studied the tactical displays with growing respect. For a species that hadn't even developed FTL travel, humans were remarkably active in space. Their orbital installations showed clear military design elements. Weapons platforms, surveillance satellites, what appeared to be early warning networks. They're preparing for war in space, he realized. Even here, in their own system, they expect conflict. The diplomatic protocols required announcing their presence through standard channels. Veltar broadcast on multiple frequencies, using the quantum translators to convert the message into what their computers estimated might be understandable human languages. People of Earth, the message began. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Council, representing 47 civilizations across the galaxy. We come seeking your aid in a matter of galactic importance. Please respond on this frequency if you are capable of understanding this transmission. The response came faster than expected. Within minutes, multiple sources on Earth were transmitting replies in several different languages. The quantum translators worked furiously to decode the flood of communications, eventually identifying the primary language used by what appeared to be the planet's military organizations. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Command. You are in violation of Sol System territorial space. Identify yourself and state your intentions immediately, or you'll be considered hostile. Veltar exchanged glances with his crew. Even in first contact with an obviously superior technology, the human's first response was a military challenge. It was either promising or terrifying. He wasn't sure which. Admiral Chun, we are a diplomatic mission seeking to establish formal contact with your species. We bring urgent news that affects not only Earth, but all life in this galaxy. We request permission to meet with your leaders to discuss a matter of mutual survival. There was a longer pause this time. When Admiral Chun responded, her tone was more cautious, but no less firm. You will remain at your current position while we verify your intentions. Any movement toward Earth or our orbital installations will be considered an act of war. Stand by for further instructions. Over the next 6 hours, Veltar found himself subjected to the most thorough security screening he had ever experienced. Human spacecraft, primitive but numerous, surrounded his ship at a respectful distance. Their weapons were laughably crude by galactic standards, but the tactical positioning showed sophisticated military thinking. Finally, Admiral Chin contacted him again. Ambassador Veltar, you are cleared to approach Earth Station Alpha in high orbit. Follow the navigation beacons exactly, and be aware that you are under constant observation. Any deviation from the prescribed course will result in immediate engagement. As the Harmony's voice approached the human space station, Veltar was impressed despite himself. The structure was built like a fortress, with obvious defensive positions and what appear to be heavy weapons emplacements. These humans might be primitive, but they clearly understood that space was a hostile environment requiring constant vigilance. The docking bay was designed for much smaller vessels, forcing Veltar to use his ship's tractor beams to maneuver carefully into position. As soon as the airlock sealed, he found himself facing a reception committee of armed human soldiers in full combat gear. Admiral Chan was exactly what Veltar had expected from her voice. Middle-aged, stern-faced, with the bearing of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. She studied the tall, graceful alien with obvious curiosity, but kept her military composure. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," she said formally. "I hope you understand the extraordinary nature of this situation. Humanity has never had contact with alien intelligence before today." "I understand completely," Veltar replied, grateful that the translators seemed to be working perfectly. "And I regret that our first meeting must be under such dire circumstances." The briefing room where they met was functional and austere, decorated only with flags representing various human military organizations. Veltar noticed immediately that even in unity, humans maintained separate military traditions, evidence of their competitive nature. "Before we discuss your urgent news," Admiral Chin began, "I need to understand what you represent. This Galactic Council, how many species? What kind of technology? And why come to us?" Veltar spent the next hour providing a basic overview of galactic civilization. He showed holographic displays of council worlds, explained the basic principles of faster-than-light travel and energy weapons, and described the peaceful nature of galactic society. Admiral Chun listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed a sharp tactical mind. When Veltar finished his presentation, she sat back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. 47 species, she mused. 10,000 years of peace. That's impressive, but it raises an obvious question. If you're so advanced and so numerous, what could possibly threaten you that you'd need help from primitive humans? The Void Hunters, Veltar said simply, and activated the holographic recordings from the destroyed worlds. For the next 20 minutes, Admiral Chun watched in growing horror as the images showed the systematic consumption of entire civilizations. Planets stripped of all organic matter, space fleets destroyed despite their technological superiority, billions of sentient beings dead in a matter of hours. Jesus Christ, she whispered when the recordings ended. How many worlds have you lost? 12-star systems completely consumed, with an estimated 40 billion casualties, Veltar replied grimly. And they're accelerating. Our best projections give us less than 2 months before they reach the core worlds. Admiral Chun stood and began pacing, her military mind already working on the problem. These creatures, they adapt to your energy weapons. What about physical damage? Kinetic weapons, explosives? We don't use such primitive methods, Veltar admitted. Energy weapons are cleaner, more efficient. We haven't employed kinetic projectiles in warfare for over 5,000 years. But you still have them? The technology? Certainly, but only for construction and mining applications. Nothing that would be suitable for combat against entities of this size. Admiral Chin stopped pacing and fixed Veltar with an intense stare. Ambassador, I need you to understand something about humanity. We've never stopped fighting. Not for 5,000 years. Not for 5 minutes. Every generation of humans has faced war, and every generation has found new ways to kill their enemies. If these Void Hunters can adapt to energy weapons, maybe they can adapt to good old-fashioned high explosives. For the first time since the Void Hunters had appeared, Veltar felt something approaching hope. You believe your primitive weapons might succeed where our advanced technology has failed. I believe, Admiral Chin said with a grim smile, that you're about to learn why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But first, I need to make some calls. If we're going to war against space monsters, we're going to need the Marines. General Marcus Rodriguez had seen every kind of hell the Earth could produce. Desert warfare, urban combat, deep space boarding actions against pirates. 30 years of service had given him a reputation as the toughest son of a bitch in the Colonial Marine Corps. But sitting in the emergency briefing room aboard Earth Station Alpha, listening to an alien ambassador describe planet-eating monsters, he realized his experience might finally be inadequate. Let me get this straight, Rodriguez said, studying the holographic displays showing the Void Hunters' latest attack. These things are bigger than our destroyers. They move faster than anything we've got, and they've already eaten 12 solar systems worth of advanced aliens who make us look like cavemen. Ambassador Veltar shifted uncomfortably in his chair. After 3 days of constant meetings with human military leaders, he was beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy found warfare so distasteful. Humans approached violence with an enthusiasm that was both fascinating and terrifying. That is essentially correct, the ambassador confirmed. However, Admiral Chun believes your kinetic weapons might prove more effective than our energy-based systems. Colonel Sarah Hassan, Rodriguez's second-in-command, leaned forward with interest. How exactly do these creatures adapt to energy weapons? Is it biological adaptation or some kind of technological defense system? Our xenobiologists aren't certain, Veltar admitted. The entities appear to be a hybrid of organic tissue and self-modifying metallic components. When hit with plasma fire, the metallic portions restructure themselves to absorb and disperse the energy. Particle beams simply pass through them without causing damage after the first few hits. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Smart. Energy weapons are predictable. Photons, particles, electromagnetic radiation. All of it follows known physics. But a chunk of depleted uranium moving at 3 kilometers per second. He smiled coldly. Physics still applies, but there's no adapting to that much kinetic energy. The briefing room fell silent as the human officers studied the tactical data. Finally, Lieutenant Colonel James Murphy, the Corps' senior strategist, spoke up. Sir, with respect, I think we're missing the bigger picture here. Even if our weapons can hurt these things, how do we get close enough to use them? Our fastest ships can barely reach 10% of light speed. Admiral Chun, who had been listening from her position at the head of the table, activated a new holographic display. That's where our alien friends come in. Ambassador Veltar has offered to provide transportation and targeting data. The Council has ships fast enough to get our people where they need to be. Transportation for how many people? Rodriguez asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Council can provide transport for approximately 1,000 of your warriors, Veltar said carefully. I understand this may seem insufficient, but our ships are designed for peaceful purposes, not military transport. The Marines exchanged glances. 1,000 troops against an enemy that had devoured billions. In any conventional analysis, it was hopeless. But Rodriguez had learned long ago that conventional analysis didn't account for human stubbornness. 1,000 Marines, he mused. Properly equipped and positioned, it could work. But we'll need more than just small arms. Colonel Hassan, what's our current inventory of heavy ordnance? Hassan consulted her tactical display. We've got full stockpiles of Mark, 12 nuclear torpedoes, quantum tunnel charges, and about 50,000 tons of various high explosives. The problem is delivery systems. Most of our heavy weapons are designed for planetary assault, not space combat. Then, we improvise, Rodriguez declared. Murphy, I want you to work with our engineering teams on adapting our weapons for space deployment. Hassan, start selecting personnel. I want volunteers only, and make sure they understand this is a one-way mission. Veltar looked confused. One way? But surely the Council ships can extract your forces after the engagement? The humans fell silent again, and Veltar realized he had misunderstood something fundamental about their approach to warfare. Finally, Rodriguez explained with the patience of a teacher addressing a slow student. Ambassador, you're thinking like a civilized being. You want to fight these monsters from a safe distance, using superior technology and tactics to minimize casualties. But that's not how humans fight when everything is on the line. He activated the tactical display, zooming in on the most recent Void Hunter attack. These creatures are consuming entire worlds. They're an extinction-level threat to every living thing in the galaxy. When humans face extinction, we don't fight to win. We fight to make sure the other guy doesn't survive either. Colonel Hassan nodded agreement. Our job isn't to come home, Ambassador. Our job is to make sure those things stop eating planets. If that requires flying a nuclear warhead directly down their throats, then that's what we do. Veltar's understanding of human psychology shifted dramatically. He had assumed their primitive nature made them less effective warriors, but he was beginning to realize the opposite might be true. Advanced civilizations fought to preserve themselves and their achievements. Humans fought to preserve others, even at the cost of their own destruction. I must inform the Council of your tactical philosophy, Veltar said quietly. They may have concerns about your methods. They can have all the concerns they want, Rodriguez replied. But if they want results, they'll give us what we need and stay out of our way. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Word of the alien threat had been classified at the highest levels, but within the military community, recruitment proceeded rapidly. Marines, Navy Special Forces, even some Army volunteers stepped forward when they learned the basic facts. Earth was threatened by an enemy that had already destroyed advanced civilizations, and humanity's only chance was to strike first. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez was among the first to volunteer. A veteran of the Titan mining conflicts and the Europa Rebellion, she had seen enough combat to know when the stakes were real. Standing in the recruitment line with 200 other Marines, she listened to the briefing officer explain what little they knew about their enemy. The target entities are designated Void Hunters, Lieutenant Williams announced. They are large, adaptive, and extremely hostile to all organic life. Our mission will be to deploy aboard Council ships and engage these entities directly using conventional weapons. A corporal near the back raised his hand. Sir, what's our extraction plan? There isn't one, Williams replied bluntly. This is a volunteer-only suicide mission. Anyone who's not comfortable with those terms can leave now without any impact on their service record. Nobody moved. Vasquez wasn't surprised. Marines had been charging into hopeless situations since the Corps was founded. It was what they did. The selection process was rigorous. Physical fitness, psychological evaluation, technical competency with weapons, and explosives. But the most important factor was something harder to quantify: the willingness to face an unknown enemy in an environment no human had ever fought in before. Rodriguez personally interviewed each selected Marine. When Vasquez sat across from him in his office, he studied her service record with obvious approval. 12 combat deployments, 4 decorations for valor, and you've never retreated from an enemy position, he observed. What makes you think you can handle fighting space monsters? Sir, I've been killing things that want to kill me for 15 years, Vasquez replied. Doesn't matter if they're pirates, separatists, or alien monsters. Dead is dead, and I'm very good at making things dead. Rodriguez smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Welcome to the Void Hunter Task Force, Gunnery Sergeant. The weapon selection process was equally intensive. Standard Marine small arms were powerful by human standards, but might be inadequate against entities the size of battleships. The solution came from an unexpected source: the mining industry. Chief Warrant Officer David Park, an expert in military engineering, had spent days reviewing industrial equipment catalogs before finding what they needed. Mag-rail mining charges, he explained to Rodriguez, designed for breaking up asteroids from the inside. Each charge contains about 50 tons of high explosives in a package small enough for one Marine to carry. And the delivery system? Rodriguez asked. Personal scale magnetic rail guns. We can launch these charges at significant velocity, and the magnetic guidance system should allow for precision targeting even in a zero-gravity environment. The rail guns were impressive weapons, 2 meters long, powered by backpack fusion cells, capable of accelerating a 50-kilogram projectile to tremendous velocity. They looked like something from science fiction, but the technology was proven and reliable. Training proceeded around the clock. The Marines had to learn to fight in true zero-gravity, not just the simulated weightlessness of orbital stations. They practiced coordinated attacks against massive targets, using their new weapons in scenarios designed to approximate combat with the Void Hunters. Ambassador Veltar watched one training exercise with growing amazement. 20 Marines attacked a mock-up target the size of a small building, moving with precision and coordination that spoke to years of training and experience. They used their railguns to deliver shaped charges to specific weak points, timing their attacks to maximize damage while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. They move like a single organism, he commented to Admiral Chun, who was observing from the command center. That's what good Marines do, Chun replied. Individual initiative combined with unit cohesion. Every one of those soldiers is trained to think independently and act as part of a team simultaneously. The exercise concluded with the target's complete destruction. As the Marines regrouped and compared performance notes, Veltar realized that human warfare was far more sophisticated than he had initially understood. Their technology might be primitive, but their tactical thinking was centuries ahead of anything the peaceful galaxy had developed. How long had her people been fighting in space? He asked Chun. About 60 years in any serious capacity, she replied. But we've been adapting ground combat tactics to three-dimensional environments for decades. Every Marine learns to fight in zero gravity as part of basic training. And they're all volunteers for this mission. Every single one. We actually had to turn away volunteers. More people want to go than we could transport. Veltar found this incomprehensible. In galactic civilization, military service was typically handled by volunteers who viewed it as a peaceful career path, rarely involving actual combat. The idea that sentient beings would volunteer for certain death in defense of strangers was completely alien to his experience. "I must ask," he said carefully, "what motivates them? They have never met the species being threatened. The Void Hunters pose no immediate threat to Earth. Why are they willing to die for civilizations they have never seen?" Chun was quiet for a long moment, watching the Marines clean and maintain their weapons with professional efficiency. "Ambassador, I'm not sure I can explain it in a way that would make sense to your people. Humans have a concept we call duty. It's not just loyalty to our own kind. It's responsibility to protect anyone who can't protect themselves." She pointed to a group of Marines discussing tactical modifications to their equipment. "Every one of those soldiers understands that if the Void Hunters consume the galaxy's advanced civilizations, Earth will eventually be targeted too. But even if that wasn't true, they'd still go. It's not about protecting themselves. It's about being the kind of person who stands between innocence and monsters." As if to prove her point, Gunnery Sergeant Vasquez approached the observation window. She snapped to attention and saluted crisply. "Admiral, General Rodriguez requests permission to begin final equipment loading," she reported. "The Marines are ready to deploy at your command." Chun returned the salute. "Permission granted, Gunnery Sergeant. Give them hell." "Yes, ma'am. It's what we do best." As Vasquez departed to carry out her orders, Veltar realized that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. For 10,000 years, galactic civilization had grown soft and peaceful, forgetting the harsh realities of survival in a hostile universe. But humans had never forgotten. They had spent their entire existence preparing for exactly this moment. The day when civilization survival depended on the willingness of warriors to charge into darkness so others could live in light. The Void Hunters had no idea what was coming for them. The Council ship Eternal Wisdom was never designed for war. Built as a research vessel for studying exotic stellar phenomena, its sleek curves and crystalline observation domes spoke to the peaceful nature of galactic civilization. But now its cargo hold were packed with human Marines, their weapons, and enough high explosives to level Small Moon. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez floated in the modified cargo bay that served as their staging area, watching her Marines perform final equipment checks. The artificial gravity had been disabled to help them acclimate to zero-G combat conditions, and the sight of fully armed soldiers drifting through the air like lethal angels was both beautiful and terrifying. "Aura," whispered Corporal Jake Morrison as he tested the magnetic seals on his armor. The ritual response echoed quietly through the bay as 20 other Marines acknowledged the traditional Marine greeting. It was a small thing, but maintaining human traditions helped keep morale up when facing an enemy that defied comprehension. Captain Veltar's voice crackled through the ship's communication system. "Attention, Marines. We are approaching the Zirian system, where long-range sensors have detected Void Hunter activity. Based on current readings, we estimate 12 entities in the system, with approximately 6 currently engaged in planetary consumption." Vasquez activated her personal communicator. "Captain, this is Gunnery Sergeant Vasquez. What's the status of any survivors in the system?" There was a pause before Veltar responded, and his tone carried a weight of sorrow. "The planet Zirian Prime had a population of 800 million. Our sensors indicate the consumption process began approximately 18 hours ago. There are no life signs remaining." The cargo bay fell silent. 800 million people dead in less than a day. For all their bravado and training, the Marines struggled to comprehend destruction on such a scale. On Earth, the deadliest wars in human history had claimed tens of millions of lives over periods of years. These creatures had exceeded that by orders of magnitude in a matter of hours. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, no relation to the Admiral, broke the silence. "Sergeant, how do we even fight something that could do that?" Vasquez understood the question. It wasn't fear. Marines didn't survive long if they couldn't function under stress. It was the practical concern of a professional soldier trying to understand an enemy beyond normal parameters. "Same way we've always fought," she replied. "We find their weak points, hit them hard, and keep hitting until they stop moving. The only difference is that this time, we're not fighting for territory or politics. We're fighting for the right of every living thing in the galaxy to keep breathing. Lieutenant Amanda Foster, the unit's newest officer, floated near the tactical display showing the Zirian system. Sergeant, I've been studying the enemy movement patterns. They're not random. There's a definite coordination between the entities. They divide up planetary surfaces systematically, like they're following some kind of protocol. Vasquez drifted over to examine the data. Foster was right. The Void Hunters weren't just mindless predators. Their attack patterns showed intelligence, even strategy. That was both encouraging and terrifying. Intelligence meant they might have weaknesses that could be exploited. It also meant they were learning from each encounter, becoming more effective with each world they devoured. Good catch, Lieutenant. That means they communicate somehow, probably coordinate their actions. If we can disrupt that coordination. She trailed off, studying the tactical display with growing interest. You're thinking like a Marine, Foster observed. Take out the command structure, and the rest of the force becomes less effective. Exactly. Captain Veltar, I need to speak with whoever's in charge of your sensors. We need to identify which entity is coordinating the others. The next hour was spent in intensive analysis. The Council ship's sophisticated sensors could detect energy patterns invisible to human equipment, and the scientists aboard were eager to help. Dr. Keth Mora, a Nexari xenobiologist, worked closely with the Marines to understand what they were seeing. There, she said, pointing to a massive entity near Zirian Prime's largest moon. That one is broadcasting complex energy patterns that the others respond to. It's definitely some kind of command function. The entity in question was larger than the others, perhaps twice the size of Earth's biggest battleships. Its surface crawled with the same organic metallic hybrid tissue, but there were additional structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. As they watched, smaller Void Hunters changed course in response to signals from the command entity. That's our target, Vasquez decided. We take out their command ship, and the rest might become confused, disorganized. At minimum, we'll learn how much damage our weapons can do. The assault plan was necessarily simple. The Eternal Wisdom would approach under stealth, using its advanced cloaking systems to avoid detection. When they reached optimal range, the Marines would launch via individual drop pods, using their personal thrusters to navigate to the target. Each Marine carried one mag-rail mining charge, designed to penetrate the entity's outer hull and detonate inside its body. Captain Veltar was deeply uncomfortable with the plan. Sergeant Vasquez, I must protest. You're essentially using my Marines as guided missiles. The survival probability approaches 0. Captain, Vasquez replied calmly. We've been guided missiles our entire careers. The only difference is that this time, we're aimed at something that really needs killing. As the Eternal Wisdom approached the outer edge of the Zirian system, the Marines made final preparations. They sealed their armor, checked their weapons one last time, and ran through communication protocols. In a few hours, they would face an enemy that had never encountered human stubbornness. The drop pods were modified scientific equipment, normally used for deploying research probes to study stellar phenomena. Each pod was barely large enough for one Marine in full gear, with minimal life support and no weapons beyond what the occupant carried. It was a one-way ticket, and everyone knew it. Marines. General Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from Earth Station Alpha. You're about to become the first humans to engage an alien enemy in combat. Make it count. Sir. Yes, sir. 21 voices responded in unison. Vasquez was the first to enter her pod. As the hatch sealed, she took a moment to look through the small viewport at the stars around her. Somewhere out there was Earth, home to 8 billion people who had no idea their fate might depend on what happened in the next few hours. Pod 1 ready for deployment, she reported. One by one, the other Marines reported ready. Lieutenant Foster was in Pod 2, Staff Sergeant Chun in Pod 3, and so on down the line. Each pod was equipped with minimal thrusters and guidance systems, but the real navigation would be up to the Marines themselves. Launching in 3, 2-1 deploy. The sensation of being fired from a ship traveling at significant velocity was indescribable. Vasquez felt herself pressed against the back of her pod as it accelerated away from the eternal wisdom, then experienced the strange weightlessness of free fall through space. Through her viewport, she could see the other pods spreading out in formation, each one a tiny speck of human determination hurtling toward an enemy beyond imagination. The flight time to the target was 47 minutes. For most of that time, the Marines maintained communication silence, conserving power and avoiding detection. But as they approached the command entity, Vasquez could see it growing larger through her viewport, and the sight was both awesome and terrifying. The thing was massive, perhaps 600 meters long and half that in width. Its surface was a constantly shifting mixture of flesh and metal, pulsing with veins of bioluminescent fluid. Smaller appendages writhed along its flanks, and she could see what appeared to be sensory organs the size of buildings studying the planet below. "Jesus," whispered Corporal Morrison over the communication channel. "That thing's bigger than Manhattan." "Stay focused," Vasquez commanded. "Remember your training. We hit it hard, we hit it fast, and we don't stop until it's dead." As they closed the final distance, the Marines activated their personal thrusters, adjusting course to hit the entity from multiple angles. The plan was to penetrate its outer hull simultaneously, overwhelming any defensive systems it might have. At 200 meters, the entity noticed them. The surface closest to the incoming pods suddenly erupted with defensive growths, organic weapons that began firing some kind of energy projectiles. The Marines scattered, using their thrusters to dodge the incoming fire while maintaining course toward their target. Pod 14 took a direct hit. Corporal Sarah Kim's pod disintegrated in a flash of superheated plasma, taking one of their finest soldiers with it. But the remaining Marines pressed on, their training overriding the shock of losing a teammate. "Kim's down," reported Staff Sergeant Chun. Continuing attack run. At 50 meters, Vasquez could see individual details on the entity's surface, structures that might be organs, weapons systems, or something else entirely. It didn't matter. Her job was to get her mining charge as deep into the creature as possible. "Impact in 10 seconds, she announced. "Remember, we're making history here. Make it count." The collision with the entity's surface was surprisingly soft. Instead of the hard impact she expected, Vasquez felt her pod sink into what appeared to be living tissue. For a moment, she wondered if the creature had some kind of shock-absorbing capability. Then, she realized the truth. The outer layer wasn't armor, it was skin. Around her, the other Marines were also penetrating the entity's surface. Some pods went deep immediately, sinking into what appeared to be softer tissue areas. Others hit what were clearly harder structures, metallic components that rang like bells when struck. "Charges armed," Vasquez reported as she activated her mining charge, deploying in 30 seconds. Through her pod sensors, she could feel movement all around her. The entity was responding to their presence, and she could sense tissue flowing around her pod like blood responding to a wound. It was trying to isolate and expel them. "Deploying charges now," she announced. 20 mining charges detonated simultaneously throughout the command entity's body. Each charge contained 50 tons of military-grade explosives designed to fracture asteroids from within. The combined effect was catastrophic. Vasquez felt her pod thrown about like a toy as massive explosions tore through the creature's interior. Through her sensors, she could detect secondary explosions as critical systems failed and unknown chemicals reacted violently. The entity's bioluminescent patterns flickered and died as its nervous system was severed. But, more importantly, she could hear something she had never expected. The creature was screaming. Not audibly, but across multiple electromagnetic frequencies, a signal of pure agony that her pod's communication systems picked up and translated into sound. It was the death cry of something that had never known pain before. "Direct hits confirmed," reported Lieutenant Foster from somewhere deep in the entity's body. "Target is showing massive internal damage." The entity's coordinated movement stopped abruptly. Its surface stopped pulsing, its weapons fell silent, and the constant stream of command signals to other Void Hunters ceased. Around Zirian's system, the other entities began moving erratically, no longer operating as a coordinated unit. Command ship is down, Vasquez reported to the Eternal Wisdom. Repeat, primary target has been eliminated. The response from Captain Veltar was filled with amazement. Confirmed, Gunnery Sergeant. The entity has ceased all activity and appears to be dead. How is that possible? Because, Vasquez replied as her pod's life support systems began failing, Marines don't know how to quit. As her pod systems died around her, Vasquez felt a moment of profound satisfaction. For the first time in galactic history, someone had struck back against the Void Hunters successfully. The command entity was dead, its body drifting lifeless through space, and the other creatures in the system were clearly confused and disorganized. But, more than that, they had proven something important. The Void Hunters weren't invincible. They could be hurt, they could be killed, and they could feel pain. That knowledge would change everything. This is Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez of the Colonial Marines. She broadcast on all frequencies as her oxygen ran low. Today, 21 Marines gave their lives to prove that these monsters can die. Use that knowledge. Make it count. And remember, no one fights alone. The transmission ended as her pod's power finally failed. But across the galaxy, in ships and stations and command centers, her final message was being recorded, analyzed, and disseminated. The Marines had done more than just kill one Void Hunter. They had given the galaxy something it had lost, hope. And they had announced to every creature in the cosmos that humanity had arrived, and the age of peaceful surrender was over.